Hey, what's up? Zach here, and today I've got the all-new Wave Wade Shadow 4. These have some pretty interesting kind of niche use cases you might need to know about. Here we go. And thanks to Wave Wade for sending me a pair of these over. However, as always, opinions are all still my own. Now, when I took the Shadow 4s out of the box, something about the silhouette just really kind of stuck out to me, and I couldn't figure out what it was, and so I put them on my feet. And when I noticed the entry into the ankle collar was just a little bit tight, kind of a little bit cumbersome. It just wasn't getting my foot into it as easy as some other shoes. And if you notice here, it's actually much more posterior, the entry, the ankle collar into the shoe. You get a much longer, almost torso of the shoe or vamp or midfoot of the shoe. And then the ankle collar is pretty vertical and it is pretty posterior. So it really locks your foot in just by the geometry of the upper of the shoe. The lockdown is pretty good. Actually, some of the eyelets are actually coated in wax, which I like. I wish all of them were. The other nice thing about the Shadow 4 is it's a continuous webbed upper, which means that the tongue is actually tied into the ankle collar, then into the strobel. So it's almost one kind of quasi booty liner in the shoe, except for it actually has a three-piece tongue, which is nice. Now the upper layer of the Shadow 4s, I almost didn't put under the microscope because it just didn't look like there was much going on. However, it is pretty interesting. It is actually a combination of woven thread as well as solid bars, or like TPU type bars. So you are getting a mixture of different textiles in the uppers, which number one provides a lot of side-to-side stability, but number two, it also just increases the durability of the shoe to side-to-side kind of torsional rotation as well as just blunt force. And on the upper durability test, the Dremel 10-second tie grit sandpaper, and the Dremel does bite through that kind of waxy coating layer. However, it does not get through the threads underneath of it. So I would say if you are in a really kind of gritty blacktop asphalt court, if you are an extreme dragger, you might start wearing through that waxy coating. However, on an indoor court, I really don't see an issue of these whatsoever. And getting into the midsole teardown, props to Wave Wade for throwing a cassette tape here in the Shank. I really appreciate that. Someone who was born in the very late 80s. However, a little bit of a different formulation here than some other Wave Wade shoes. At least it's a feeling underfoot. Now, if you look, the majority of the midsole is kind of this full bed cloud foam, which is that proprietary polymer type foam. Now, if you notice in these, when I was pressing down on them, and even just feeling them on foot, they do feel super solid underfoot. They have that real chunky, supportive feeling underfoot. They're not as forgiving as some other Wave Wade shoes because of that. However, just kind of picking them up and feeling them, the cloud foam does feel a little bit lighter and less dense actually to touching it than some other cloud formulations. So I'm not sure if it's different or not. Then there is boom foam here right under the ball of the foot going here up into the toe box. But the interesting thing is the Shank on these is completely bottom loaded, and it's in more of like a harness configuration where it's only touching the bottom of the midsole in a couple areas, and there's this little air gap. However, because it comes up in this U shape along both sides and really kind of rides the midsole foam on the inside and outside of the shoe, or medial and lateral side of the shoe, it does still give a lot of stability to that midsole foam. And because cloud foam is such a strong polymer, you honestly get more bang for your buck putting it outsole based and wrapping it around. That way it gets more of the torsional stability, but then it's not so rock hard underfoot. So for cloud foam, I actually like this configuration a lot because you are getting such rotational stability while also getting a lot of durability and stability kind of underfoot. And looking at it on the jump height test, got 39 centimeters, which wasn't really that surprising. I mean, the cloud foam does have a nice little snap to it. Boom foam does have some tension underneath it, which is nice. The thing is, you have to break them in a little bit before jumping becomes easy because of the ankle collar. Kind of the vamp and the lace line there, right where it meets the ankle collar, does need broken in before they become really fluid to jump in. So I'd say if you're gonna get these, make sure you give these a decent break in before you really start trying to see what they can do in terms of vertical performance. Looking at the outsole tread, this is another one of those radiating kind of quasi-digital herringbone type patterns. It does have kind of optimal spacing between the rows of tread, which I really like because it'll grab most courts really well, even slicker courts or dustier courts. Because of that space, you will start to get traction pretty easily. And because the heel footbed and the forefoot footbed is pretty wide, you see the lateral flange comes really wide on these. They do still retain so much stability combined with the outsole base Shank. And looking at these on the shuttle test, came in at 14.80 seconds. Now, I will caveat that it was extremely cold outside. And like I said, I think maybe with another week of breaking these in, I probably would have done even better on that test. And I think on a warm day when these materials may not have been as stiff, I think I would have had a little more degrees of freedom. However, that should show you that these do their best work after a little bit more of an extended break-in than say something like the Wave Wade 10, the All City 10 V2, or kind of other shoes like that. And on the outsole durability test, the Dremel 10-second tie grit sandpaper, I mean, not even a millimeter of damage on these. Drama barometer is pretty high, so even on an outdoor court, they're gonna hold up pretty well. But getting into the fit of the Shadow 4s, you know, they are wide enough in the forefoot for a 2E. I think if you are a really narrow foot, you probably wanna go down a half size on these just so you kind of get that one-to-one performance fit. Medium foot, and then you can go true to size. On a 2E, I would try to go true to size just because of the length of the midfoot in there. You wanna get a one-to-one fit. A 4E, I would probably just try to go up one half size. Like I said, the entry into these is not the easiest, so you're gonna have to break them in a little bit, just, you know, maybe get a shoehorn for them or something, especially because the heel is so sloped down. So that might be a way to kind of get around that if you are a wider foot and want to get an easier entry. But speaking of that heel, if you are somebody with a more snake-bitten foot, I would say for ball of foot pain, these are fine. The boom foam is super forgiving. I'd say if you're somebody with more rotational issues, like flat foot or anything like that, I think you can just throw an orthotic in these and be just fine. They do accept orthotics pretty easily. But for somebody with heel pain, because that cloud foam is so dense and unforgiving underfoot, I think unless you have an orthotic in these, you're gonna start to feel a little bit of shock under these. I know for me, on my left side, because that foot is still a little bit sensitive, I did notice that coming down off of rebounds or trying to come down when my Achilles was really eccentrically loading and I was trying to push back up, these just had a little bit of unforgiveness back there. So I'd say if you are someone with a snake-bitten foot and you wanna get these shoes for more of their ankle sprain protection or rotational protection, then I would throw an orthotic in these. You'll get a lot more comfort out of them. And most importantly, the playability of the Shadow 4s, and like I said in the beginning, where the real niche type of characteristics come into these. I will say, because of the geometry of the uppers and how they're cut, and because of where they give the mechanical advantage to your foot, they are relatively much faster going backwards versus forwards. So if you're looking for a shoe for more defensive purposes, these will give you a lot better of a snap going backwards versus when you're trying to drive to the hoop. And because they are so much more stable than a lot of other shoes out there, especially side to side, they're also really good, like I said, for going backwards and when you're really not sure kind of what is behind you, what kind of moves you're gonna have to make or kind of quick steps you're gonna have to make. So I would say if you are someone that needs these for more defensive purposes or when you're trying to defend a position, trying to hold your ground, I would say these are really a great pickup. In terms of speed going front to back, like I said, they just don't have it unless you're really breaking them in or unless you bring that to the table yourself. And in terms of vertical takeoff, you know, because the Shank is bottom loaded, yeah, it gives so much more rotational stability and allows that cloud foam to be a little more comfortable. However, they're just not like something like the Way of Wade 10 that just has that incredible snap to them. So I think more for a defensive minded shoe, these are phenomenal. And for someone either maybe playing pickleball indoors or outdoors in these that wants a high top, ton of rotational stability, just a ton of force going side to side, then I think that's where the pickup is for these. Like I said, a little bit of niche use cases, but for what they're meant for, they are one of the best out there. But I'd love to know, are you kind of that player that needs a little bit more of that backwards type speed, or are you looking for more straight line kind of side to side? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you want to see their sibling to the Way of Wade Shadow 4, the Way of Wade All City 10 V2, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I'll see you in the next one.